The December Landmarks meeting is called to order. Welcome to the December 4th, 2024 Landmarks Board meeting. It is 6 p.m. Before we begin, Marcy will review the virtual meeting decorum.
All right. Good evening. The city has engaged with community members to co-create a vision for productive, meaningful, and inclusive civic conversations. This vision supports physical and emotional safety for community members, staff, and board and commission members, as well as democracy for people of all ages, identities, lived experiences, and political perspectives. More about this vision and the project's community engagement process can be found online through this link. The following examples are rules of decorum found in the Boulder Revised Code and other guidelines that support this vision. These will be upheld during this meeting. All remarks and testimony shall be limited to matters related to city business. No participant shall make threats or use other forms of intimidation against any person. Obscenity, racial epithets, and other speech and behavior that disrupts or otherwise impedes the ability to conduct the meeting are prohibited. And participants may raise their hand to speak during open comment and public comment periods during the hearings. Individuals must display their whole name before being allowed to speak online, and currently only audio testimony is permitted online. This next slide goes back to you, Abby.
Thank you, Marcy. I do want to acknowledge that we have a full quorum this evening and that a recording of this meeting will be available in the record archives and on YouTube within 28 days of this meeting. We'll do a quick roll call and introduction of board members, starting with Ronnie.
Ronnie Pelucio, Landmarks Board Member.
Chelsea Castellano, Landmarks Board Member.
I'm Abby Daniels, the current chair of the Landmarks Board.
John Decker, Landmarks Board Member.
Renee Globick, Landmarks Board Member.
And I'm Kurt Nordbeck. I'm the liaison from Planning Board to the Landmarks Board.
Thank you. We know that there may be people here this evening to participate, whether virtually or here in chambers, who may have strong emotions about some of the projects we'll be discussing. We do want to hear from you, but we do find it more productive if you are speaking to persuade us rather than berating us, staff, or the applicant. As with regular Landmarks Board meetings, you may only speak at the appropriate time during the public hearing. Requests to speak outside of those times will be denied. We will request any members here of the public who wish to speak on the public hearings this evening to sign up using the sheet with Aubrey. And virtual participants will then follow as normal by raising their virtual hand. As board chair, I will call for a roll call vote on any motions made this evening. So our first agenda item is the approval of the meetings from both the November 6th meeting, and I move that we approve those minutes. Do we have a second?
I second.
On a motion by me, seconded by Ronnie, those in favor of approving the November 6th minute meetings, Ronnie?
Aye.
Chelsea?
Aye.
I vote aye.
I vote aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So those minute meetings are passed. For the November 20th meetings, can I move even though I wasn't at the meeting?
I'll
Oh,
make
you-
the
okay.
motion. Okay, I'll move that. I would like to move that we approve the special meeting November 20th minutes.
I second.
Thank you. On a motion by John, seconded by Ronnie. Ronnie?
Aye.
Chelsea?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
And Renee?
Aye.
So those meeting minutes have passed as well. So now we'll turn to public participation for any items not on the agenda. This is the time to speak. We have 2 public hearings, so if you're speaking about anything outside of those hearings, this would be the time. I don't know if anyone here in chambers wants to speak or wait till the 2 public hearings. Okay, Leonard, you may go sign up with Aubrey. Thank you, Leonard. And if you'll state your full name for the recording, then your 3 minutes will commence.
Yes, Leonard Siegel, and longtime resident of Boulder. And hello, Landmarks Board. And I just wanted to invite you all to the Historic Boulder Holiday House Tour, which is coming up this weekend. We've got 5 historic homes. 4 of them are in the University Place Historic District. And they'll be decked out in their holiday finery. And it. Okay.
I can hear you.
I can hear him.
All right. Assuming you all heard that, I'll just move on and say, I hope you can make it and let your friends and family know there's a great variety of really beautiful properties with wonderful stories, and we have volunteers ready to help you guide you through these properties. So come one, come all. And then the last thing I just want to say is Historic Boulder is behind you and wants to be a part of the solution to the issues facing historic preservation and your board. So we look forward to the next year being an important one to be working even closer together. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonard. And now I'll turn to Aubrey to see if we have any participants who'd like to address us virtually.
If anyone would like to speak virtually, raise your virtual hand now. And I don't think we have anyone, Abby. We're good to move on.
Okay, thank you, Aubrey. We'll officially close public participation for items not on tonight's agenda. So moving right along, this is a discussion of landmark alteration and demolition applications issued and pending.
All right, so we currently have 2 stays of demolition pending. The first is the garage at 2119 Mariposa Avenue. And at your October 9th meeting, you voted to place a stay of demolition of up to 180 days to look at alternatives of could this building be preserved or reincorporated into the redevelopment. The house had previously been approved after a stay of demolition. And so on November 13th, Abby and I met on site with the owner and walked through. Abby, you weren't here at the last meeting, so if now would be a great opportunity if you wanted to share any observations or takeaways from that site visit, and then I can pick it back up with the timeline and your options in front of you this evening.
Well, here are my thoughts about it. The whole property is currently on the market. And this is one of those things where the code changes that City Council may be approving and looking at on December 19th. This is one of those where I think it's wise of the owner to reach out and see if the Landmarks Board either wanted to initiate or pursue potential landmarking, or she could have a demolition permit in hand while it is on the market. And this is one of those things where, depending on how the board decides to proceed on this, if the board at some point, and I think the next opportunity is the January 8th meeting, if demolition was approved, I wish it would be the demolition permit could last longer than the 6 months, because it's a very charming building. I personally think that there could be a potential buyer who might say this would be perfect. They couldn't have anything on that footprint if this was demolished and rebuilt. So I could see where Vanessa could say it has been approved for demolition, but keep it standing perhaps. She not incur the cost to demolish it, but as part of the marketing for the property, you know, I can see where she would like to say it can be demolished. You don't, you know, the Landmarks Board has made a decision either way, you know, because a potential seller may want to know if we are going to proceed with initiating landmarking. It's very charming. Someone who would buy it and maybe can do their own work might find a great use for it, if, you know, especially if it was someone who was in a situation to rehab it themselves. And we just don't know with it on the market. So the only thing I noticed is that 6 month window really does limit a situation like this, where she could have her approval if she wanted it as part of selling it, but it wouldn't necessarily need to go down in case someone came along and said, hey, I want to make it work.
I have a question
Mhm.
on this one. The other house on this property, did it get demolished?
It's gone. It's gone.
Gone already. Okay.
Right.
That was the question. I haven't been over.
And this is sweet and charming, and I could see a path forward where if someone wanted to rehab it, that repurpose it, like the carport could probably be let go. It's very clear to me that it's not original to it. It was added later. So I don't know if the board wants to entertain asking that something's on the February or January 8th agenda, or just keep the stay in place. We can't take any action tonight except a scheduling decision. Kurt?
I just wanted to ask a question, and I probably misunderstood, but I thought that you said something about if it were to be demolished, nothing could be built on the
Not
same.
that current footprint. It's non-conforming where it's located on the property.
Okay.
That's
With
why-
regard to setback?
Right.
Okay.
So I could see,
I
every
understand.
once in a while you get that potential buyer's like, hey, I do want to keep it, maybe remove the carport and do something with it.
Maybe the only thing I'd add that was from the site visit that Vanessa had pointed out is that the garage is all the way back on the lot and it's along an alleyway, but the garage door faces Mariposa, and so the drive all the way along the east side of the property, one, through building permit, they would encourage vehicular access from the alleyway rather than the front. And if there was a garage door on the back, it wouldn't meet backing distance. So I think there's a lot of potential for this building. It's, built really well. It's generally in good condition. It's a shell right now that you need to add, heating, cooling, and electricity. It has potential, but I think as a garage, there might be challenges for a potential buyer. But this
Right,
is
I
one
could
where
see it used more like a studio, perhaps an ADU, it could be added on to maybe, but I mean, there is definitely potential, it's definitely charming. But I don't know if the board just wants the stay to remain in place or proactively schedule something for the January 8th meeting. I don't know how full that agenda is.
if that's a factor in your decision, there are 3 cases already for the January 1. 4 is our max. So we certainly could add it, but know that, with the holidays, we're trying to get ahead of that packet. And like you said, like there isn't the same urgency as some of the other cases. I know that she wants an answer. She's ready for the process to, come to an answer. But as soon as the board makes a decision, let's say you approve the demolition, the clock starts clicking for that 6 months, where I think what she's looking for is options as the property's on the market. So where other applicants come each meeting and say, please end this stay early, that hasn't been the impression I've gotten, but I know, people don't want this process to be longer than it needs to be.
Right, and I do know we'd have an opportunity on January 8th to schedule something for the February 5th meeting, just right before it runs out. And we will know by January 8th if a demolition permit would be longer, or would that still be working its way through the city's process?
So my understanding, and Chris Reynolds from the city attorney's office is online tonight, but my understanding is that any applications submitted after December 19th would be under the code amendments. So those approvals would be good for 1 year, and anything submitted before that is good for 180 days. So if I'm understanding Chris correctly, this
Yeah.
approval, if it is approved, is good for 6 months.
That's
And then we
accurate.
do, oh, go ahead, Chris.
All I was going to say, Marcy, was that that was accurate. And I agree with what you just said.
Oh, thank you. And then we do have, when these demos come in after the Landmarks Board has approved it, we do consider that with a new application and have approved them at the staff level after something had been decided by the landmarks board. So,
But the 6 month clock starts ticking when the
when, if
So
the
the-
board either let the stay expire or
Okay.
voted to issue it,
okay.
So they would get the year.
they would get 6 months because
Of
the
which it was
application came in
submitted.
before December
Oh.
19th.
Yeah.
Not based on our,
For the
when we
year.
make our decision.
Right.
So I don't know if any board members want to,
Well, I guess I'm sorry. I don't know if I understand.
Actually, you shut yourself off.
Oh no,
you?
no,
No, you didn't. Sorry.
you're
My
on.
bad.
the red is confusing, isn't it?
It's hot. It's a hot mic.
Yeah.
So, but would we wouldn't have the power then at any meeting to make the permit last a year. Yeah, so there's no option to do that.
Right.
So,
If we,
Yeah.
but if
And
we
see, how
took
is it-
any kind of action, wouldn't that reset the clock on when the action expired? I'm just curious, because since we have voted to approve the 1 year, the demo application lasts for 1 year, wouldn't subsequent action, like if we extended the stay tonight after the fact that we had voted the 1 year, wouldn't that extended stay on expiration yield a 1 year permit time afterward?
No,
Chris
and
is there.
jump on in,
This
Chris,
is
if you like, but it's,
exotic theory, but
yeah, everything submitted before the 19th, which is when council will consider the code amendments.
so it's the initial
under the-
submission
yeah.
period.
Yeah, it's
You
that
can't
initial
change
submission.
that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm not hearing anyone wanting to schedule something for the January 8th meeting, but we will have an opportunity as always to discuss this on January 8th. And if you get a chance to at least go by there,
Mhm.
please. In fact, I believe Vanessa wasn't concerned if anyone walked back there on the property, but maybe we could clarify that with her just to see it
Right.
before January 8th.
All
And
right.
then Marcy, the update for the next stay of demolition?
Yes, so
Same age.
the stay was placed just 2 weeks ago, and so the update tonight will be brief in that we are looking to schedule a stay of demolition meeting on site with the applicants, and let's do that right now. So they had proposed next Thursday, the December 12th, but I think that the Friday, December 13th might work better for board members. So Chelsea and John were the dedicated board representatives for this one. Everyone is welcome. It'll be publicly noticed. But if we could nail down a date, I think the stars are aligning around the afternoon of Friday, December 13th. I see one
I'm
thumbs up.
available then no matter what time it is.
Okay,
Make that.
great.
I can.
Okay, and it's not going to be a 4-hour meeting, so would we like to narrow it down to,
It's 1 hour.
like,
usually.
it's usually 1 hour. Is there any time within that window that you all would like, or I can go back to the applicant with that window? They said they are pretty sure they could make that window work. So if anybody has a preference to start with, happy to lead with that.
I mean, I would propose 1 o'clock
Great,
or right after 1 o'clock.
wonderful. Okay,
I could do that and then it looks like,
I'm good at 1.
and then Marcy, I know the members of the public are welcome to attend. They just can't provide any feedback, but Historic Boulder would be welcome to attend once that date and time's confirmed with St. Aidan's, right?
yes, yep, and that will be publicly noticed on our website once that date and time is confirmed, but hold your calendars for 1 o'clock on Friday, the 13th. And I will send a confirmation, or Aubrey will probably send a confirmation once we hear back from the owners and applicants.
Great, thank you.
Wonderful.
And
And
now
then-
it's time to move on to our first public hearing this evening. Item 5A is a public hearing in consideration of an application to designate the property 575 Euclid Avenue as an individual landmark pursuant to Section 911.5 of the Boulder Revised Code 1981 and under the procedures prescribed by Chapter 1-3 of the quasi judicial hearings of the Boulder Revised Code. And Marcy will be doing this staff presentation.
All right, thank you. My name is Marcy Gerwing, Principal Planner with Planning and Development Services, and I affirm to tell the truth. The quasi-judicial hearing process starts with all speaking to the item are sworn in. We actually do that at the time that you speak. I'll pause here for board members to note any ex parte contacts for 575 Euclid, any conversations with community members, site visits, or anything else you read or saw about this property that's not in the memo. Great. We'll move on to our staff presentation, followed by board questions, and then the applicant's presentation, followed by board questions. And then the public hearing is opened for public comment, and the board may ask questions. The applicant then has a chance to respond to anything that was said. And after that, the public hearing portion is closed and the board discusses. A motion requires an affirmative vote of at least 3 members to pass, and motions must state findings, conclusions, and a recommendation. And finally, a record of the hearing is available in central records. The criteria for this individual landmark designation is found in 911.5C of the Boulder Revised Code, and that's that the Landmarks Board shall determine whether the designation conforms with the purposes and standards in sections 911.1 of the legislative intent and 911.2, City Council may designate landmarks in historic districts. The options in front of you this evening are to either recommend designation to City Council, in which case we would schedule a public hearing with City Council within 100 days, or you can recommend denial of the designation, and that is subject to a 45-day call-up period, and the owners may file a notice of appeal within 21 days of your decision. This application process started in a way in 2014 when the previous owner accepted the recognition of the building as a structure of merit in 2014. That was with a group of other remarkable mid-century buildings, and the structure of merit program is pretty underutilized, but it's like a gold star for a building. It's a way to recognize significant places, but it doesn't come with any regulation. The landmark designation application was submitted in September of this year, and you'll recognize this property because you've seen it both for changes to the house at the LDRC and then review of the construction of a garage at the Landmarks Board meeting in November. So that brings us to today for the Landmarks Board designation hearing, and I think we've covered those 2 LACs that were approved in September and November. Let's see. The property at 575 Euclid is located between Gilbert and 6th Street and south of Geneva Avenue. It is accessed from Euclid Avenue, but the house predominantly faces east and west. In addition to the house, there is an existing accessory building at the rear of the site, and the property is located within the proposed Flatirons Park Historic District, which is a proposed non-contiguous district between Pennsylvania Avenue and Baseline and from the western city limits to 8th Street. And that district was proposed as part of the 2000 Historic Context and Survey of Modern Architecture in Boulder. And it proposes the inclusion of 18 individually significant mid-century modern houses, including this one at 575 Euclid. The house was designed by Cecile Sirotkin in collaboration with Titian Papachristou, who also designed the Jesser House next door at 595 Euclid. It sits on a relatively large lot, framed by a well-maintained garden filled with plants. The walls are constructed of stacked concrete block that are painted, complemented by the wood and glass window walls. The scalloped roofs, some with cantilevered eaves, and the sculptural metal chimney contribute to the distinctive design. The key Usonian characteristics include the horizontal orientation, cubist volumes, and the flat roofs with cantilevered eaves, and the relationship between solid and void that is created by the window pattern. It is a blend of simplicity and spaciousness, featuring an extensive use of glass, with floor-to-ceiling windows and skylights that open the living spaces to the outdoors. The character-defining features include a cluster of intersecting curvilinear walls that extend into the landscape, interconnected 1 and 2 story volumes, numerous outdoor spaces, and strips of ribbon and clear story windows overlooking the lawn. A freestanding accessory building was designed by Boulder architect L. Gale Abels in the spirit of the original house. It has an L-shaped footprint and is 1 story with a basement below. The building is constructed of concrete block with a series of windows on the north and south elevations and entrances on the south and east elevations. The accessory building was commissioned by George and Betty Woodman in 1968 to facilitate Betty's work as an artist. It features high ceilings, exposed wooden beams, and expansive windows that allow for natural light. The buildings retain a high degree of historic integrity. Changes are limited to the construction of the accessory building in 1968, and it's considered a contributing feature of the property. In 2024, the LDRC approved the replacement of the windows and doors and construction of a rear addition, and the full board approved the construction of a detached 715 square foot garage. The house is in its original location, and much of the setting remains with mature landscaping. The design, including its form, plan, space, structure, and style of the original structure, is intact. Many of the original materials remain, including the sculptural metal chimney, stacked concrete blockwork, and wooden beams. The skilled workmanship is apparent through the curvilinear roof form and cantilevered eaves, and the historic character of the building conveys the feeling and association with the building's history and its notable residents. And the historic character of the building conveys its feeling and association, as you can see in these 2 photos, one taken in the 1960s and one from the same angle in 2024. Moving now to the significance criteria, we start with the historic significance. The house meets the historic significance criteria, and in the survey that was completed in 2000, it found that the house would be eligible for designation both as an individual local landmark and for inclusion on the State Register of Historic Places. It is associated with 3 couples, all known for their outstanding contributions to the international art scene. The house was designed by Cecile Sirotkin in collaboration with architect Tushin Papachristou. Canadian by birth, Cecile moved to Chicago at the age of 16 to attend college and study art. She was awarded a Marshall Fields Scholarship to study at the Institute of Design in Chicago. And among her teachers at the Institute were architect Ludwig Mies van der Rohe and artists Laszlo Moholy-Nagy and Georgi Kepes. She later earned a Master of Fine Arts at the American University in Washington, D.C., and worked as a senior designer for the Marshall Field and Company, and did freelance design for other clients in Chicago. Philip Sirotkin received his bachelor's degree from Wayne State University in 1945, and his master's degree and doctorate in political science and constitutional law from the University of Chicago. He was an instructor and an assistant professor of political science at Wellesley College between 1950 and 1957, and the couple moved to Boulder in 1957. Philip worked at the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education and developed the mental health education program. He became director in 1976. Cecile was a leader in the development of the arts in Colorado, and she is credited with researching and writing the legislation that helped fund the original Art in All public buildings. She also helped to coordinate the first Colorado Women in the Arts program in 1979. George and Betty Woodman purchased the property in 1967. Betty trained at the School for American Craftsmen at Alfred University in New York. She played a key role in establishing Boulder's Pottery Lab in 1956, one of the first recreational pottery programs in the United States, and taught ceramics classes for the city of Boulder starting in 1974. After purchasing the house, the Woodmans added a gas line for kilns in early 1967 and commissioned the artist's studio accessory building in 1968. The studio became a gathering space for local artists and students in Boulder who came to learn and collaborate with Betty. George was also an artist, choosing to study philosophy at Harvard University. George's paintings reside at the Guggenheim, Denver, and Brooklyn Museum collections. 3 of his photographs are included in the photographs collection in the Museum of Modern Art. And Betty's ceramic sculptures sit in the Whitney, Metropolitan, and Brooklyn museums, as well as the Modern Art, Yale, Denver, and Boston museums, and the Victorian and Albert Museum in London. The Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York showed a retrospective of Betty's work in 2006, the first time a living woman and a working ceramicist had been so honored. Married couple Everett Brown and Louise Patton purchased the house in May of 1997 from the Woodman family, who had relocated to New York. Everett Brown attended the Chouinard Art Institute in Los Angeles and worked for Bill Melendez Productions as a director, production design, animator, and art designer. He is credited with many animated works, including A Charlie Brown Thanksgiving from 1973, Here Comes Garfield in 1982, Kathy, This Is America, Charlie Brown, Frosty Returns, and many others. Everett retired from directing in 1997 and taught 2D animation at the Art Institute of Colorado until he retired in May of 2016. Louise Patton also worked at Bill Melendez Productions and is credited on animated works including Life is a Circus, Charlie Brown from 1980, Peanuts, 50 Years and Still Counting, which was a video game in 2008. The couple is well known in Boulder for their work with the Boulder Arts League, a local nonprofit dedicated to traditional and contemporary arts and crafts of the book. Everett passed away in June of 2023, and Louise sold the house to the current owner in 2024. Moving on to the architectural significance. Completed in 1959, the house is one of Boulder's most important and earliest examples of contemporary architecture. It embodies key Usonian characteristics, including the horizontal orientation, cubist volumes and flat roofs with cantilevered eaves, and the relationship between solid and void that is created by the window pattern. The house is one of a kind, with a unique and unconventional form that embodies the spirit of the post-war era of expressive and innovative architectural design. Titian Papachristou designed the house in collaboration with Cecile Sirotkin, incorporating open spaces and a seamless connection with the landscape. Titian Papachristou was born in Athens, Greece in 1928 and educated at Princeton. He worked for James Hunter, collaborated with Charles Hartling, and later partnered with Daniel Havcost in Denver. Papachristou designed a distinctive mid-century homes using innovative, cost-effective materials like concrete, cinder block, wood, and glass. He was inspired by Frank Lloyd Wright, Le Corbusier, and Greek island architecture, and his designs reflect Boulder's openness to avant-garde architecture in the 1950s and 1960s. L. Gale Abels later designed the Artist Studio, which complemented Papachristou's design. Abels was born in August 1927 in Sutherland, Iowa. He graduated with distinction from the University of Minnesota and earned a master's degree in architecture in 1952 from the Harvard Graduate School of Design under the direction of Walter Gropius. Abels moved to Colorado in 1958, first working for the prominent Denver firm of Munchow Associates Architects, and he opened his own practice, L. Gale Abels and Associates, in 1963 and lectured at the University of Colorado's School of Architecture. Both architects were influential in shaping Boulder's architectural identity during the mid-20th century. And the third part of the significance criteria looks at the potential environmental significance, and the design of the house complements the topography of the site, as well as that of the neighboring building, the Jesser House, which was designed by Papachristou at the same time. The two buildings share a distinctive character. They use a common modernist style, use of natural materials such as wood and concrete block, curvilinear walls, and landscaping designed to complement the buildings. With that, staff recommends that the Landmarks Board recommend to City Council that it designate the property at 575 Euclid Avenue as a local historic landmark to be known as the Sirotkin Woodman House, finding that it meets the standards for individual landmark designation, and adopt the staff memorandum as findings of the board. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, I thought the memo was really well written, and it was wonderful to learn about the property and the people. So I just compliment you guys for like a very thorough description of this property.
Thank you. And I failed to give full credit and kudos to our intern, Marin, who took on this project as her first memo that she really led the research and writing on, and then for Claire for partnering to really bring it across the finish line. So it was a group effort, but a ton of credit goes to Marin and the remarkable amount of research for a number of significant people. Really,
It's great. I had a question about the roof form. And I don't know if we know this, but do we know what the construction of that wavy roof is?
It's like concrete.
that might be a question best for the owner, who I believe is on the call this evening. I know that the roofing is a membrane, like a flexible membrane, and I believe there's a combination of steel and wood, but I would save that for an accurate answer from the owner.
Will do.
Any other questions?
No.
Great. That concludes my staff presentation. We'll then turn it over to the applicant if they would like to present. I also understand they might be here to just available for questions that you might have.
Thank you, Marcy. So Aubrey, I'm going to look to you to bring the applicants.
They are slowly coming in.
Great.
All right, you should be able to unmute and test your camera for us.
And as a reminder to both Sherry and Charlie, we will need to swear you in if you speak and to answer questions as well. And Sherry, you know this very well. You will have 10 minutes, however you choose to do it. Are you unmuted?
I'm
Oh,
unmuted.
perfect. Yes, you are.
And Charlie, I don't know if you can hear us. I see that you're on. Can you unmute and then start your video if you want?
There we go.
There you go.
So Sherry, please swear to tell the board the full truth, and Charlie as well.
I swear to tell the whole truth as I know it.
Me too.
Thank you. And then your 10 minutes will begin.
I really don't have a presentation tonight. I felt that Marcy and Marin and Claire did an excellent job with the memo, and I don't have anything to add. I can answer Ronnie's question about the roof, and it was, I don't know if you wanted to share my screen. I have the original blueprints. The roof was made of wood forms to make the scallop. And I'd have to find that detail here on my computer, but I do have it. So I don't know. I'm thrilled to be working on such an important building of Boulder's history, and I hope I can do it justice.
if you don't have any comments right now, I'll ask my colleagues on the board if they have any questions for either of you. I don't see or hear any, and I think part of that's a tribute to the great, oh,
Yeah,
Ronnie,
I
I'm so
was
sorry.
gonna say I don't have any questions, but Sherry, thanks for letting us know what the construction is. That it's almost like an illusion that it might be concrete, which is why I was wondering.
Shapes
Although
sometimes are.
I read, there's a membrane. I thought maybe membrane on top of some sort of concrete material, but that is just an interesting thing to think on and to understand. And it clearly is easier to hold up wood than concrete. But and then I also just wanted to say, I when I read through this, I also kind of reflected a little bit on my career and like how I'm going to be remembered. But I did want to tell you that I think that you are doing an excellent job on the accessory structure, and am grateful that the team in general has taken this approach to preservation as well as sensitive design and additions to something that is this special. So I just want to share that with you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this point? Kurt, please.
I have one other question for staff, and I'm sorry that I didn't ask it earlier. The landmark boundary that's proposed doesn't incorporate the entire outer wall, which looks to me like it's because it's outside the property boundary. And so I guess in the city right of way, is there any precedent for a landmark boundary that would go into city right of way?
That is a great question, and you never miss anything, Kurt. That isn't something that the owners and Sherry and I have talked about. Claire's going to change the slide so you all can see it. Yes, I've noticed it but haven't addressed it. But you're right that the contributing landscape walls appear to extend beyond the property line, and that's something that we would certainly advocate for preserving. And I would have to the tea house boundary, the Dushanbe tea house boundary, which was designated in 2020, that landmark boundary crosses property lines and includes a portion of the right-of-way. Of course, there's no building like the tea house, but we have gotten creative in terms of landmark boundaries. So maybe following this hearing, if the board recommends designation, Sherry and Charlie and I can regroup and kind of open that conversation about recommending a boundary to council.
Thank you.
Kurt really doesn't miss anything, does he? Thank you. And Sherry, as you well know, we'll come back to you for an additional 3 minutes after we hear from members of the public. If you have anything else to add after that.
Okay, cool.
So now we'll turn to public participation for this agenda item. You will need to be sworn in if you're here in person or joining us virtually. And Aubrey, do you have any signups from members of the public here?
Okay, we do have one sign up for Leonard Siegel for this matter. So let's start there.
Yeah. And Leonard, if you'll, yes, thank you.
I'm Leonard Siegel. Oh, do I need to turn this on? Is it on?
It's on,
Okay.
sorry.
My hand is still up. Is it on now? Okay, good. And I swear to tell the whole truth as I know it. This is, I can't be objective at all about this because I worked for Tish and Papacristo in New York City. And I remember when he came to visit once or twice, we got into my car and I drove around town and he wanted to see this one. He wanted to see both of them, the two of them together. And he felt a personal connection to these two houses. It was a unique opportunity for him to design two at the same time. And I think we also should probably give credit to Charles Hartling, because Hartling worked also on the Jesser House, and they were working together at that point in time in history. So I think there's some of Charles Hartling in this house as well. I definitely see Le Corbusian aspects to the scalloped roof form, and I'm not at all surprised that it's maybe a plywood design. And I had the opportunity to meet with Charlie and Sherry at the house, and we walked around, and I was just thrilled that somebody like Charlie, with his background in design and development and construction, was interested in saving this building and building off of it and respecting it. And so I think it's a great win for preservation to get this as a designated landmark, and also to get the building extended with 21st century use that Charlie is imagining with Sherry to execute on this site. And I think, you know, if there's a little bit of Titian Papacristo in me, he would be thrilled tonight that you all are considering designating this building. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now, Aubrey, if you will facilitate any members of the public who are joining virtually.
All right, if anyone would like to speak virtually, please raise your hand now. We do have one hand raised already, so let's start there. Lynn Siegel, I will give you permission to speak momentarily.
And Lynn, before your 3 minutes begin, if you'll state your full name for the record and that you swear to tell us the truth as you know it.
Lynn Siegel, and I swear to tell the truth the best as I know it. I liked hearing about the history, all the sequential people of artistic renown, artistic ability living in the place. It's just an interesting place, and of course it should be designated a landmark. That's all, really. Thanks.
Thank you, Lynn.
All right, and let's give it a few more seconds. If anyone else would like to speak, just raise your hand and I'll give you permission to speak. Not seeing anyone, I think we're good to move on, Abby.
Thank you so much, Aubrey. So we'll officially close public participation for this agenda item. And Sherry or Charlie, I don't know if you have anything to add before we go into our deliberations.
No.
Okay, so now we will turn to our board, and I don't know if anyone would like to kick it off this evening. I mean, I'm happy to.
Okay.
So this really excites me because my art history degree finally came into play again this evening. So I have not seen a property or known of a property in Boulder that's not only a masterpiece, but celebrates so many artists who have owned this home in the past. And I think that, you know, both in the staff memo, and again, kudos to Marion for that, but also just the artist names and things that read, I mean, it just oozed who's who of both architecture and who's who in the art world. And I've actually seen one of George Woodman's thing at the Brooklyn Museum of Art. And I've also, I mean, it just so, for me, was so exciting to see that it not just celebrates one of Papacristo's masterworks, and this will be our second landmark, I believe. The King Street, the Sampson Wood House is also by Titian Papacristo. To have Lynn's personal experience with him, I mean, it's like the best of Boulder, you know, the creativity, the architects that flocked here after World War II and created some of the most magical mid-century architecture I've seen anywhere in this world. But so I'm really excited to support this. I do want to say I think it's in very good hands with Sherry Bells, because I saw what she did with the LeBreau House at 819 6th Street. That was like, as Lynn will know, was so close to being demolished and carted off to the landfill. And then she saved a Hobie Wagner masterpiece there. So I know you're the perfect person for this project. So I'm just thrilled that we get to forward this that I vote to forward this to City Council.
It's interesting that this is termed deliberation because this is one of those cases where there's virtually nothing to deliberate. It's everything that's been said. It's a showpiece. The building, without knowing its history, kind of speaks for itself as a kind of remarkable and unique piece of architecture. It also speaks to a period in Colorado, not just Boulder, but generally in the Front Range, of very experimental architecture. It's interesting how many of them came through the same firms and then spread out, as it were. And it's a period of architecture that you could even argue has been somewhat lost, at least the lively experimentalism in more recent times. So it's a no-brainer. This one has to be designated. I love the fact that it was brought to us and that it is a totally voluntary process. It's validation of the program and of the reason that we want to celebrate our history by designating it. So I support it.
Chelsea.
I support the recommendation.
Yep, similarly, I share the sentiments of my colleagues and I support the designation as well.
Renee.
I support the designation. You guys have said it. So, I mean, the staff recommendation is great. It was super interesting about all I love listening to these things and hearing about who lived there and who designed it and all these things. It's just a really great thing about the history of Boulder. So kudos to you guys.
And Kurt.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. I think this is very appropriate as a landmark for the city, and it's a fantastic house, and I look forward to seeing it remain such a way.
And I just wanted to add one thing. I do appreciate the observation about the landmark boundary and would like to somehow propose that we incorporate language that lets the boundary potentially encompass the walls as noted. So I guess, Marcy, is there something we need to do to facilitate that?
You know, Chris, if you're on the line, I could use your help there because the standard the standard motion language doesn't reference it references the name but not the specific boundary. That's usually something we work out before the ordinance. And so I'm comfortable with hearing the feedback and then working along with the owners towards the city council memo. But if there's something more formal, Chris, could you chime in?
Yeah, I think the standard process is what I would recommend here in terms of if the board decides to recommend landmarking here, that in crafting the ordinance, the specific boundaries can be laid out and incorporated, and we've got that feedback here, and in the drafting of the ordinance can be taken into account. So I don't think that we need to do anything different than what's contained here in the motion.
Thank you. Does that answer your question? Would someone like to make a motion?
I will.
Go.
Where is the motion language? I move the Landmarks Board recommends to the City Council that it designate the property at 575 Euclid Avenue as a local historic landmark to be known as the Sirotkin Woodman House, finding that it meets the standards for individual landmark designation in sections 9-11-1 and 9-11-2 BRC 1981, and adopt the staff memorandum dated December 4th, 2024 as the findings of the board.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. On a motion by John, seconded by Ronnie, we'll do a vote. Ronnie?
Aye.
Chelsea?
Aye.
I vote aye.
I vote aye.
Aye.
And the motion carries unanimously, not a surprise, I think, to any of us. And Marcy will very briefly go over the next steps.
All right, thank you. So let's see. We didn't make a next step slide. So what will happen is that we will work towards the city council first reading and second reading, and we are expediting the review process so that the folks can apply for building permit as soon as possible and apply the modifications for designated properties. So this is on a lightning fast track for a landmark designation, where first reading is scheduled for December 19th. And then the second reading, which will be a public hearing, is scheduled for January 9th. So well within the 100 days. And so if City Council approves the designation, the building is designated and the city will provide a bronze plaque. And now that the Landmarks Board has voted unanimously to approve designation, I just want to say, Charlie, to the owner, this was one of the most meaningful projects to work on, and thank you for inviting us out to view such a remarkable piece, and it is in such good hands. And it's hard to believe, but true, that as soon as this property went on the market earlier this year, we did receive an email from a realtor asking about the demolition, saying the value is only in the land. So it is amazing. It means a whole lot to be here in December 2024, celebrating this incredible landmark. And really, it is in incredible hands with this next steward. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We'll now move on to our next agenda item, item 5B. This is a public hearing in consideration of an application to demolish a building constructed 1935 at 844 19th Street, a non-landmarked property older than 50 years old pursuant to section 91123 of the Boulder Revised Code 1981 and under the procedures prescribed by chapter 1-3 of the quasi-judicial hearings Boulder Revised Code. And Claire will be doing this staff presentation.
Thank you, Abby. All right. Okay, so this is also a quasi-judicial hearing, so I'll swear in. I'm Claire Brandt, Historic Preservation Planner, and I affirm that I will tell the truth. And now I will pause for a couple of seconds and ask or see if any board members have any ex parte contacts. Only need to respond if you do. Okay, seeing none. It's awkward. So here's an overview of the process we'll go through today. I'm going to give the staff presentation. After that, the board may ask questions, and the applicant will have up to 10 minutes to present to the board, and the board may ask questions of them. We'll then open the public hearing. After all members of the public have made comments, the applicant may respond to anything that was said, and then the board will deliberate. A motion requires an affirmative vote of at least 3 members to pass, and will state findings, conclusions, and a recommendation. And a record of this hearing will be available in a couple of days as a video recording, and the official record will be added to the records archive within 28 days. The criteria for review is outlined in the Boulder Revised Code under 91123. This is a demolition application, and the purpose of reviewing demolition applications is to prevent the loss of buildings that may have historic or architectural significance by providing time to consider alternatives to demolition. The criteria that can be considered are the eligibility of the building for designation as an individual landmark. That's if it has historic or architectural significance. the relationship of the building to the character of the neighborhood as an established and definable area, and the reasonable condition of the building, which includes the projected cost of restoration or repair, although not deterioration caused by unreasonable neglect. And the options for the board tonight are to approve the demolition request or place a stay of demolition to allow time to consider alternatives. A stay would not exceed 180 days from the day the review fee was paid, so it would expire on April 22nd of next year. So this is the application process so far. The department accepted the application to demolish the non-designated building on October 3rd. Due to the age of the building, the initial review was held by the Landmarks Design Review Committee, and they referred the application to the Landmarks Board, finding there was probable cause to believe the building may be eligible for designation as an individual landmark. And this is the building here, 844 19th Street. It's located mid-block between Aurora Avenue and Cascade Avenue on the east side of 19th Street. The lot is bordered on the east by an alley, which was confusingly historically Broadway Street. It's not within a historic district or an identified potential historic district. The building itself is located at the rear of the property with a deep front setback. The lot contains a number of mature trees and vegetation. It's a one-story vernacular building with an asymmetrical U-shaped plan. Both of the front gables include simplified half timbering and stucco. The facade is clad in unusual asymmetrical and randomly applied stone and brick tile. This is the south side of the building and the southeast corner. You can see the continuation of that randomly applied stone and tile. The windows themselves are under the shallow eaves. This is the rear portion of the building. It's an attached garage, which was original, with a gable roof and shingle in the gable end. The rear of the house includes a combination of the stone brick tile cladding and decorative painted wood shingle. So according to county records, the house was constructed in 1935. However, our research showed that the house was constructed by the owner starting in 1931 and was occupied by 1932. The building is in the original location, and the original design of the building does not appear to have been modified since at least 1935, when this earlier image was made. The building retains some of its historic materials, notably that stone and brick tile cladding and the half timbering and stucco in the gable ends. However, the windows, some doors, and the wood shingle roof have all been replaced. The building demonstrates vernacular workmanship typical of the original construction, and the building's ability to convey a feeling of its time has not been diminished, has somewhat diminished by the change in context with the surrounding neighborhood, which has developed since the 1950s. The setting of the house on the property has not been diminished with walkways, lawn, and decorative plantings near the house. And the area remains residential. So in general, the building retains some ability to convey its association with its early residents and architecture. However, staff found that while the building dates from the period of Great Depression, we didn't consider the property to possess a high degree of historic significance. The property was not a site of a historic event that had an effect upon society, nor does the building show character, interest, or value as part of the development of the community, nor does it exemplify the cultural, political, economic, or social heritage of the community. Mattie Huston purchased the land, and her daughter Lois constructed the house with her husband Arthur Baum. Maynard Clyde Skinner subsequently purchased the house in 1959, and the family rented out the property for many years. None of the past residents appear to be locally or nationally significant. The building does represent an unusual vernacular residential period of construction during the Great Depression. This was a period of severe economic hardship. And the construction of any building during this period is interesting. This building uses materials in a unique way that provides some aesthetic interest, but is not a significant example of an architectural style of the past. Also, the building does not have environmental significance. It doesn't represent a unique natural or man-made environment, and the property is not located within the boundaries of a potential historic district. It's one of the earliest non-agricultural houses constructed in this area, which was relatively undeveloped in the 1950s when this image was made. However, the area predominantly reflects the residential building boom that occurred after the 1950s and 60s. So the applicant provided information about the condition of the building and the projected cost of repair, which was included in the packet. And the applicant is here and can answer any questions you may have. So staff's findings are that while the house is an example of a unique vernacular residential building constructed during the Great Depression, the property's architectural significance is minimal. It does not meet the significance criteria for individual landmark designation and is not associated with persons or events significant to local, state, or national history, nor does it have environmental significance. The character of the neighborhood has been diminished over time, and the loss of this building would not constitute a significant impact on Boulder's historic resources. And it has been demonstrated to be economically challenging to rehabilitate the building. Therefore, staff's recommendation is that a stay of demolition for the property at 844 19th Street is not appropriate based on the criteria. And staff's recommendation is to approve the application to demolish the building. So that's the end of staff presentation. A quick reminder of the next steps in the process. The applicant has up to 10 minutes to present to the board, followed by public participation and an opportunity for the applicant to respond to anything that's said, and then board deliberation. And the question today for the board is if the building has historic significance. If yes, the board will place a stay of demolition on the application to provide time to consider alternatives. If no, the board will approve the demolition request. So any questions for staff? Okay.
I don't see or hear any.
Aubrey, I'm hoping the applicant is here, as I promised they would be. Okay, good.
Yes, it looks like we have Elizabeth and Ken out there. And I've sent them the promotion request. Oh, and Trip is there as well. Great. You should all have the ability to test your mic and your video momentarily.
I think I'm good.
Perfect. You sound good. You look good.
Well, that's debatable, but thank you.
And Elizabeth, I don't know if you're the only one speaking tonight, but I will need to swear everyone who might be speaking to this in. So if you're going to kick off the 10 minutes, just raise your right hand and say you promise to tell the board the full truth and give your name for our recording, please. Full name.
Okay, this is Elizabeth Smith with Finas Architecture, and I promise to tell the whole truth as I understand it and know it.
Thank you.
I'm basically just here kind of in the same capacity to answer some specific questions. The information that we provided to Claire and the Landmark Review Board, we did a little bit of a deep dive. We had some cost analysis provided in terms of what it might take to actually get in there and try to restore some or all of this property versus new. As most of you can imagine, there is a significant difference between the two just with the state of where this building is. The one thing you can't see, and I'm sure staff realized it when they went and visited the site, was the interior of the space has about 3 or 4 different floor levels. Some of it is rotting at the bottom. It actually sits over the setback, the rear setback, against the alley. So it's a very difficult site to try to reuse any portion of it. If we were going to try to save even a part of it, we would need to be adding on to the west of it, which would basically block anything for, on some level, in terms of what we're trying to save. So that was something that we had looked at to see if there was a possibility with that, but we just couldn't see how we could save part of it and not end up hiding it with what we would need to be adding on to it. If there's any questions, I'm here, but I didn't have much more of a presentation.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Elizabeth? Okay, I don't believe we do, and certainly not at this point, but there will be an opportunity. We'll now turn to members of the public who wish to speak to this. No pressure that I'm
right.
looking at Leonard. No.
Yeah.
So Aubrey, do you?
We don't have anyone in person, so let's go
Okay.
to virtual. We have one hand up virtually, and if anyone else would like to speak, just raise your hand and we'll get to you next. So, Lynn Siegel, you're up first.
Lynn Siegel, swear to tell the truth as I know it. Yeah, this house looks pretty nice to me, but I don't think there should be any demolitions in Boulder without a visit by the Landmarks Board. And I'd like to see this in live, and then I'd make a decision on it. That's my 2. Bye.
Thank you, Lynn. And Aubrey, I'll give you another moment or 2 to see if anyone else would like to speak to this.
All right, not seeing any other hands. I think we're okay to move on.
Thank you. Then we will officially close public comment for agenda item 5B. And Elizabeth, this is another opportunity. If there's anything you want to add or anything you want to say before the board begins deliberations.
I think I'm good. I think one thing that we found out, we had a structural engineer go out and analyze the structure for us. And one thing that was interesting is that even though there's that kind of unique exterior stone and tile work on it, it is actually non-structural, just applied to the exterior. And so that was interesting just personally to find that out, because it looks structural until you start to dive a little bit into it. So.
Okay, thank you for that information. And Marcy, I think it was it, or Claire, the Lopez architectural firm who has a lot of experience in historic properties. I know, I mean, my experience, they are very well versed in properties of this age and older, and
Yeah, it was
historic properties.
performed. Yeah, it was performed by Lopez, Small and Smith, and Ian Smith, one of the partners, actually did the analysis.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll turn it back to the board for discussion. I don't know if there's anyone who would like to kick it off.
Sure, I can. So I was on the DRC when this came through, and I think, as Elizabeth pointed, some of the uniqueness of the building really relates to the exterior material. And clearly, it is of an era of construction worthy of our review, and it has other aspects that look like they're historic in nature. But I do agree with staff's assessment in that while this building, I think, rightfully went through a process to come to the board and to have a review that looked at other aspects of designation criteria, that this one doesn't rise to the merit of designation.
Who would like to follow Ronnie?
I can follow. We're limited in review of a demolition to the issue of historic significance and or worthiness for designation. So I'm going to make my standard statement. I think demolition needs to be more comprehensively looked at when it is reviewed. That being said, I have great respect for and confidence in staff's review of these issues and their body of knowledge and their recommendations. I generally and this time support. So I will be voting to let it go.
Thank you, John. Chelsea or Renee? Chelsea?
Sure, I'll make it short. I agree with staff's recommendation. I think it was a thorough analysis, and it sounds like the applicant also did a lot of research and their due diligence to identify the conditions of the building and what it would take to save it. So I think we are at a point where we can safely make a determination that it can be let go for now. It's served its purpose for a long time.
Thank you. Renee?
I will agree with staff's recommendation. I do think that they did their due diligence. They went out, they saw the site. Along with some of the public comment, demolition in general is hard. And I think that, we're quick to demo things. So my inclination is always, let's not demo. But I do think staff went out there, and I think the applicant has done enough due diligence to know that, to move to the next stage to ask not to be demoed it's just not in significance for the historic. So I will be approving with staff's recommendation.
Thank you. And this is one of those nights where our two public hearings, we have the one that's joyful and celebrates preserving, a wonderful piece of mid-century architecture here in Boulder. And then we have what I find the hardest thing to do, and that is to really weigh and assess a demolition of something that will be lost forever. And it's kind of funny to have both polar opposites tonight, but that's what we signed up for. That's what we're here to do. I think that and people who know me well know I look for every way and every reason to try to save a building or at least place a stay and really see if there's any creative alternatives to demolition. I think that the most fascinating thing to me is it was one of the few buildings built during the Depression. I also think that the stonework that I found so charming and so character defining, Elizabeth and staff, you've explained why it really isn't the stonework I thought it might be, because I could look at this and say, this is such a rare example of this type of architecture. Maybe we need to place a stay. And I think if staff had recommended that, I probably would have fairly happily supported a stay of demolition. However, as and I know that the board is, as we work with city staff about the update for the preservation plan, I also recognize that we have to look at things differently. And I think that as much as I lament losing this building forever, I don't see a path forward to designation, especially designation over an owner's objection. So it's been very rare for me to ever support a demolition permit at this level here, because where there's a will, there's a way. But I think that I'm in agreement with my colleagues tonight. And I think that the convincing thing for me is staff's memorandum and staff's presentation, because, otherwise I'd say, well, could we do a stay? But I really do think you guys so clearly and so convincingly brought this to us. And I think that, but I am glad it came before us, because I think until it was called up at LDRC and you had this chance to visit it, I don't think we really knew what we had. And so, I reluctantly, and I lament it, but I will support staff's recommendation. And I want to give Kurt a chance to speak as well.
Thank you. I think that the board is going in the right direction. That is how I would be voting if I were voting. The one thing I will say is more from my planning board perspective. I believe that in RM2, which is the zone district that this is in, that two principal dwellings are not an allowed use. I could be wrong about that. But depending on what the owner wants to do with it, potentially that if it were allowed, that could be a good solution that would, it would technically, if you were building something in front of it, it would technically still be a demolition, right? Because you're obscuring the front wall, but it would actually allow for preservation of the historic material. But as often happens, our zoning codes are kind of getting in our own way on that. And so it's something to consider as the historic plan is revised, and also as the Boulder Valley Comp Plan is revised in the coming couple of years. That would be something to potentially consider.
Thank you, Kurt. And I agree with John, your comments about at some point there has to be a fulsome conversation about demo and Renee too, and whatever, but that's not what's before us tonight.
No,
So, you know, we have to respond to what was presented to us in the testimony. So, if there are no additional comments or anything anyone wants to share, I will ask if anyone's ready to make a motion.
I can. I move the Landmarks Board approve the application to demolish the building at 844 19th Street, finding that the building does not have significance under the criteria set forth in Section 911-23 F BRC 1981.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
On a motion by Ronnie, seconded by John, we'll take a vote. Ronnie?
Aye.
Chelsea?
Aye.
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 The motion passes unanimously, and Claire will explain next steps for the applicant.
Yeah, thank you, Abby. As we heard earlier in the discussion, the approval is for 180 days. So an approval letter will be issued by staff, and it will expire on June 2nd of next year. And the permit to deconstruct the building needs to be obtained within those 180 days. If it's not, then it will need to go back through the process, which will require going back to the LDRC. And if you have any questions about that, Elizabeth or anybody else, please let me know.
Will do. Thank you.
And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. And now it's time to move on to matters.
All right. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Okay. All right. So a few housekeeping things before we go to a year in review. So the next scheduled meeting is going to be on January 8th. The first Wednesday of the month is on the 1st and or is right after the holiday. So we're moving it to January 8th. That'll be a virtual meeting. We also asked for your confirmation for the CPI conference registration by today. That conference is going to be at the Cheyenne Mountain Resort in Colorado Springs at the end of January. And then there's a special board training opportunity on that Saturday, February 1st. We don't have a full schedule, but I know staff is planning to go at least Wednesday because we have a session. And then there is something on, I have another session on Friday. So staff will be going. You're all encouraged to attend, but usually we just register everybody, but it's just the cost of registration, whereas this will cover lodging as well. So we just want to get an accurate head count before spending those tax dollars.
Do you want us to tell you now or email?
Maybe if you could email
Aubrey. Okay.
And we'll give you an extension till tomorrow. But after that.
Thank you.
Okay. All righty. Okay, I don't know if anybody else is a Spotify user, but our Spotify Wrapped came out today, and I always love that kind of chance to look back at the highlights for the year. So this is not as interesting or as like graphically beautiful or as short as the Spotify Wrapped, but I do think that it can often feel like a hamster wheel with our work, and so it's nice to like take a pause, reflect on the last year. This is the last meeting of 2024. Let's take a look at what you all reviewed in this year. So, oops, let me go to my notes. In the last year, you all recommended approval for 6 new landmarks, which is on track with our average of 5 to 7 designations each year. The theme for the 2024 landmarks seemed to be a growing appreciation for mid-century modern buildings. Boulder, as we know, has an incredible buildings from this time period, and it was this brief period where innovative, expressive designs really thrived here. So starting with the oldest landmark, the Thelma Maydew House, was originally proposed for demolition and preserves at a significant building from the 1880s. It's an example of how a stay of demolition can change the course of a project, and the owners were really key partners in that project. The Gardner Sandow House is a unique one because it's already designated as part of the Mapleton Hill Historic District, but the longtime owners really wanted to recognize it individually. The words from the owner were particularly touching as she recalled her family's history here dating back to the 1940s. The Fake Bonner Hartman Eli House was designed by Hobart Wagner and is believed to be one of the first accessibly designed houses. It's an excellent example of how historic buildings can be sensitively updated to be energy efficient. And the owners nominated their house after it was featured on a Month of Modern tour, and Historic Boulder suggested the idea of landmark designation. So you never know where these owner-supported designations will come from. And then the Sirotkin Woodman House, as we just heard, is a remarkable building designed by Tish and Papa Christou, with an incredible legacy of artists. And the Leach Moritz House is an understated gem in Newlands, and that one was really wonderful to connect with the owner and architect to see what a special place it is. And then finally, the Geological Society of America building is a delightful postmodern building that will be adaptively reused into affordable housing. So I'll note that both the Maydew House and the Sirotkin Woodman House were previously recognized as structures of merit by the Landmarks Board. As I mentioned, it's an honorary program, but sometimes it can inspire the owners to designate their buildings. Let's see, we reviewed 4 tax credit applications in 2020 for the 2023 tax year that provided a total of $127,000 in tax credits. And since 2022, we've approved a total of $262,300 in tax credits. Our tax credit applications have fluctuated, but we're still within our average of 2 to 5 applications a year. The program is expanding next year, so it'll be interesting to see if we have more applications. For example, the maximum, which is $50,000 for a credit, will double to $100,000, which is, I think, I looked back at the projects for the last 5 years. Not everyone would have exceeded that. You have to spend a lot to get that much, but quite a few would have maximized that credit. So we'll see.
That's consistent with the increase in material and construction costs in
Right.
the last 5 years.
Yeah, looking right.
Doubling it.
Can I ask a question on that also? Do
Yeah,
you
of
know the
course.
status of funding of the tax credit program?
Yeah, so it was approved all the way through 2038 for the residential tax credit, and then the commercial tax credit, Governor Polis created a new pool for projects specific to adaptively reusing historic properties for housing. And so those are more on the commercial side. We won't review those in-house, but hopefully I'm sure that will lead to a lot of great adaptive reuse projects. So that sets up a separate pool for just housing, and then there's the pool for other commercial projects, which opens every January and then usually is depleted by the end. So that one's more competitive, whereas the residential one is I don't think there's a limit.
Great.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
And it resets every 10 years. So for long-term owners, you can get now $100,000 every 10 years. All right. Moving to landmark alteration certificate and demolition applications. This chart shows the trends over the last 5 years. And in 2024, we reviewed 162 applications. That number will increase a bit in the final few weeks of the year, but that 162 represents an 11% increase from last year. However, we're about 6% below the 5-year average of 172 cases per year. And then we reviewed 138 demo applications for non-designated buildings over 50 years old, and we saw that's a 20% increase in demo applications from last year, but it's right on track with our 5-year average of 136 cases a year. So there was a real dip down in 2023, and I don't know why.
When you say, and that includes the one staff approves at staff level.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all of the demo applications. But then looking at the levels of review, the LACs are there on the left, and over 60% of LACs were reviewed at the LDRC level, and less than 10% were reviewed by the full Landmarks Board. Staff reviewed just under 30% of the applications, and this is where we expect to see the biggest amount of change with the new administrative rule, and that those could even flip and dramatically decrease the number of LDRC cases. And then for demolitions, you can see that the vast majority, 3/4 of the applications, were reviewed by staff. Those are post-1940 primary buildings and accessory buildings. The LDRC reviewed about 20% of the applications, and the Landmarks Board reviewed 7%. So looking at the 28 pre-1940 applications, 16 of those, so about 72%, were approved at the initial review within 2 weeks. 72%. 6 of those, so about 30%, were referred to the Landmarks Board, and 4 are still in review, so I didn't count those. And then of those referred to the Landmarks Board, 2 withdrew before going to a hearing, and then the 4 others were approved either at that initial review or after a stay of demolition. And for post-1940 buildings, 97% of the applications in 2024 were approved after the initial review. And 3 were referred to the Landmarks Board, all went forward with the process. And in case you feel like you're missing out on these staff level reviews, this is a sample of the routine, again, that's the biggest slice of pie. Here, we reviewed 110 post-1940 buildings and then a handful of accessory buildings. It's 3/4 of our demo applications are these, pretty bread and butter ranch houses. And then the way the code is written, we review things like siding replacement on a street-facing wall for a Martin Acres house. Though it was interesting pulling this heat map on the left-hand side. Clearly there's a concentration in South Boulder, which is what you would expect for post-war houses, but there's also a concentration up north and west, but more evenly distributed than I would have thought. I feel like they're all in South Boulder, but clearly they're not. Yeah.
Did you say you review siding replacement on post-1940s houses?
Yeah, we do. We do, which is on our list
Interesting.
of dream code amendments because it really clogs the clogs the filter sometimes.
Wow.
So yeah, the way the code is written, it says the demolition of a street-facing wall, you have to keep the exterior sheathing. So if you're replacing the siding,
The materials.
it comes
yeah.
through our preservation review, which for an eligible building, taking the original siding and putting something could impact it, but it catches a lot of stuff it doesn't need to catch.
Yeah, it can have a lot to do with the visual character of a facade. Is the simple things like the width of the siding units and orientation of the siding. If you change it, it's completely different looking composition.
Right. Oh, I don't doubt that. I was just surprised on post 1940 non-designated buildings that
Yeah.
there would be review.
Yeah.
Well, and speaking post 1940, I just want to make a comment. It's not, I mean, it's more that as the preservation program embarks on updating the preservation plan next year, I think it's fascinating in our code that it has a date that staff can start reviewing it and make the decision, but the date is like set in a specific date,
move
and it
with the
doesn't
time.
move like
It should.
60 years or 50, you know what I mean? And I don't know how other communities do it, but I kind of personally someday want to think about that a little bit more, that it's fixed in a year as opposed to like a time frame. And I just find that interesting.
Mhm. Yeah, I picture our demo code language as a net, but that's like handmade, and some there's like really big holes and there's really small holes, and so like siding gets caught, but things like front porches don't. And so it was written in 1994, and other than the administrative rule that allows us to look at the scope of demolition, which is great, there's some room for improvement. Yeah.
How many total demolitions post 1940?
110. Though that does capture the accessory buildings, but it's such a small number that I grouped them together.
Do we have do we know how many total demolitions for residential structures the city sees?
I looked up that number a handful of years ago and don't remember, because what is misleading about this is that this captures siding replacement as well as full scrapes. And so the deconstruction permits are much lower than 110 or 150. But I don't know how many of those are less than 50 years old and how many are older, but I'd be interested in knowing that statistic.
Does anybody keep any kind of watch on the cubic feet of demolition waste created every year?
That would send
I'm-
you to
I'm-
cardiac arrest.
I know, but that is
Right.
the real number, the volume of material.
I think our colleagues in Climate Initiative might be tracking that as part of the deconstruction process.
It should
but,
be. if
Um,
not, yeah,
but I don't know how to pull those numbers,
yeah.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, the LDRC, big changes are coming next year. So this is a nice snapshot of the final year of how it used to be. So in 2024, we had 39 LDRC meetings out of the 52 weeks of the year. We had 145 reviews. Some of those were cases that came back multiple times, but 65% of the cases were approved in one meeting. And so that means that it took 2 weeks to get through the historic preservation process for 65% of the LDRC cases. We totaled an estimate of the volunteer time of you all combined, and that came in at 144 hours. And then we put a range in of per board member, it ranged from 26 hours up to 60 hours. And John gets the trophy for dedicating 60 hours of volunteer time. And that is an estimate based on the average LDRC case time of 38 minutes or
Keeps
so.
me off the street.
I don't know what you're going to do next year.
Yeah, right.
And then looking at our landmarks board, we had 13 meetings because we had a special meeting in November. We had one retreat that was in June, and we had 7 stay of demolition meetings or full board site visits. You all reviewed 15 applications for landmark alteration certificates and 10 applications for demolitions, and then 6 applications for new landmarks. And then I didn't add, there, you also had 2 hearings to either initiate designation or issue a demolition. So interesting to see if there were themes in the LAC applications that the full board reviewed. And the theme of 2024 is accessory buildings. And yeah, the question came up, well, is that because of the ADU changes? Is there some like market forces? But they're really so unique. It goes from the Chautauqua greenhouse to ADUs to the new, hotel on Spruce and 11th. And then there were, an eclectic mix of a new house in a historic district, one after the fact review, modifications to key building features, whether that was dormers or solar panels or doors, and then 2 additions to non-contributing buildings, and then the demolition of one house. So this is kind of the smaller scale projects. There was the after the fact fence way back in January, solar panels and garage doors last month, and then the 2 dormers and front wall kind of later in the summer and fall. And then the accessory buildings, as I mentioned, there is the new garage at the Sirotkin House, the greenhouse up at Chautauqua, a new accessory building up in the Hillside Historic District, which isn't a district that we see a lot of activity in. And then the kind of 2 bigger projects were the new house in the West Pearl Historic District that you all saw twice, and then the kind of major renovation of a non-contributing house at 432 Concord in construction of a new accessory building, and that one is pending final review by the LDRC. And then kind of these 2 downtown more commercial projects of 1105 Spruce, which was really 3 projects crammed into one application with an addition to a historic house, rehabilitation of a carriage house, and then construction of a new building. And then the rooftop addition next to the Boulder Theater was a really unique one as well. And then our demolition applications saw a theme of mid-century buildings. So these were each called up by staff to the full landmarks board. And you can see the 2260 baseline right on the corner of Broadway and Baseline, and then just up Broadway at 777 Broadway were both these kind of rustic modern buildings. 2111 was one that the board placed a shorter stay of demolition and really moved on, setting up a site visit, walking the property with the applicants, and then ultimately letting that one go. And then 2425 Colorado is pending review. And then we have the small old houses. A handful of these, 7th Street, Arapahoe, and Orange Place were all, and 19th Street, were all called up to the full board, but then approved at the first meeting. And so I think what I heard with those it was worthwhile to understand the building a bit more, understand the history and the changes to the building, but ultimately they didn't meet the eligibility significant criteria or the kind of worth putting a stay on. And then the 613 Walnut had a stay of demolition on it, and then the garage at Mariposa is pending review. And then there were 2. The 1015 Juniper was a carryover from last year, where you all held a hearing to consider initiation or demolition, as well as with 77 Broadway, but ultimately let those 2 go as well. Any reflection about the cases? Do you all have any thoughts about seeing all the work, a year's worth of work, flash before your eyes?
No wonder I'm tired. Marcy, the ones that post 1940 that staff chose to call up to the full board, thank you, because I know you could have by right, made a staff decision on those. So I do really appreciate those being called up. And then I had a comment about the small ones. Now I can't remember what the comment was. It's gone. So, no, thank you for doing this. This is very illuminating.
And there's one more section, which is one of the biggest, I think, achievements from this last year, and the biggest change to the program of how we operate is the process improvements that you all passed in the fall. And so that will allow staff review for the majority of LAC projects. It gives us additional time to complete that initial review, which will give us flexibility in scheduling LDRC meetings. The approvals for both LACs and demos will be valid for 1 year if council passes these changes. And then removing the planning board liaison role from the landmarks board will also be a change that would be going forward if council approves those in 2 weeks. And then I put these under honorable mention, but gosh, this represents a whole lot of work. And also kind of the kind of approach and philosophy of this current preservation program. So we welcomed Chris Reynolds and his good counsel in January of this last year. Renee chose to re-up, and thank you for doing that.
Double down.
You can't take it back.
No, you can't.
We presented at and attended the Saving Places conference, and I think the relevancy project that was kind of the keynote of that whole conference really resonated with many of us. The proposed historic district effort, while it was not approved, I think really was meaningful in challenging the kind of dominant narratives that was being told about the history, asking new questions, and a lot of good research and partnerships came out of that process. And the research that came out of that, Claire then contributed to an exhibit at the Museum of Boulder over the summer and gave a talk. And she also pulled it together for a talk at the, that was not a nice way of putting it. You pulled your research together in a compelling way. And stepped foot into a very academic setting at the Center for Colorado's Women's History and presented at their 2024 symposium at History Colorado. And we were able to see that presentation at our staff meeting, and it was really incredible of like, you can zoom in and zoom in and zoom in and just like understand these stories of these women and these people that lived here that had been completely erased until recently. So I think you never know where the research will take you or, where the program will go, but those are some really positive things that have come out of that. Any reflections on that before we look ahead to 2025? Great. All right, well, 2025 is going to be the year of the 10-year update to the Historic Preservation Plan. We are going to dovetail with the major update to the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan. And so stay tuned for that. That'll be a major effort and an exciting opportunity to really refresh the plan that is our strategic vision for the program. We will say goodbye to Ronnie in February after what I believe is. Sorry. Has it been 8 years that you've served? I've lost track.
Feels like 15. Yeah.
How long is the term?
A term is 5.
So it'll be
amazing. Yeah. Yes. So I think I'm still in the denial stage, but by February, maybe we'll move through that. But that'll be a huge change. and then a possible farewell to Kurt if the council removes that planning board
Don't
role.
look so happy, Kurt. You look-
So I did just want to say, we don't know what the outcome of council's review of that will be, but didn't want to miss this opportunity just to say thank you for just how engaged and thoughtful your comments are, and how I think you've really brought a good integration of the two boards. And I also wish you the best for using all of that extra time that you'll have back.
Thank you. It really has been a joy working with everybody here. So
Yeah.
appreciate it.
And you're always welcome to come
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah,
At least for dinner.
your comments zero in so often in a very useful way that you will be missed.
I knew it was fortunate to have a former Landmarks board member serve as the planning board liaison, but despite kind of Kurt's background and resume and everything, the myriad ways he contributes to the community of Boulder, it's the way you think. It's, you know, it's really brilliant in your mind, and you really bring insightful, thought-provoking things that I've looked at for I don't want to say how many years, and you just shed a new light on it because you see it from a different prism than I do a lot of times. So it's going to be a real loss, but you do get some more free time back.
All right. So we'll also be looking to attend the Saving Places conference down in Colorado Springs, and then Claire and I will be presenting a session that came out of the civic area research, but about challenging the dominant narratives, telling a different story, considering different perspectives, and we have a fair amount of work to do between now and then, but it's going to come together. It's going to come together, as well as an American Planning Association conference is going to be hosted here in Denver in the spring, and I'll be partnering on a session about Boulder's history of planning, and then the impact that has had on like the good and the bad. And we're partnering with Jill Adler Grano, and it's going to be a hike. And so I will send you all info if you all might be interested in attending.
I would
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Okay, and then we'll also be contributing to the Heritage for All, recognizing a broader history in the landmark designations and on the state register. That is part of the America 250, Colorado 150, sesquicentennial. There's another, I'm sure another syllable in there. And then the Museum of Boulder, we will contribute to a exhibit and events celebrating LGBTQ history here in Boulder, related to not just Clela Rorix at the Boulder County Courthouse, but also Penfield Tate II and a lot of other individuals here in Boulder. And so we will also let you know when those are happening. And I'll also follow up and say we did get a letter of support in for the NHL designation under the wire, but thank you. I sent it to Abby and she got back to me within 10 minutes, and we were already past the deadline, but they still accepted it. So, all right, that is the recap of 2024. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Can you speak to the a little bit of the process overview for the 10-year update, and how the board will be involved and how that'll look?
Yeah, it's a skeleton right now. But with the development of the historic preservation plan in 2013, the landmarks board members played a central role. You know, you are the ones that will adopt it, and so having your input and really shape it through the process is going to be key. So I think whoever replaces Ronnie will come in at like a pretty important point on the board. And then we'll also plug into the community engagement efforts and pop-ups with the comp plan and kind of piggyback on that rather than try and compete with it or, you know, be asking the community too many questions or about too many things. So we'll try and align as much as we can on that and hopefully reach a broader audience than we have in the past. I will say with the 5-year update, there was a open house where we had more presentation boards than we did people. And so I really want to, that was a while ago, but that was like a low point in terms of like, we got to do better. And we have a different team. We have a community engagement dedicated staff now, but I think it's very fortunate that the comp plan will be kicking off and their reach and that interest is much broader than what I think we can do on our own. That's as much as I know right now, but I will be bringing it together pretty rapidly at the beginning of 2025 for a project plan. Yeah, Kurt.
This overview was fantastic. Do you think that there might be any opportunity to present that to council? Because I think that they would really appreciate that. You know, they get these LACs for call up and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know that they have a terribly good big picture view of it, especially ones who haven't been involved with the program. So
that's a great idea.
If you could, I think it'd be fantastic.
Yeah, and with some edits, it could probably be a little bit more like standalone, you know, be able to just pick it up and be like, here's what the program did in 2024. I think that's great.
Marcy.
Yeah.
You should do it as a video.
Oh, John.
And
I think
in
he needs
lieu of the letter to council.
I was just thinking this would be a better letter to council than
Exactly.
Yeah, this is
But you're right, it could be done
in
a video.
more of a media presentation.
That is true. You know, give me more time and I would have done the Spotify Wrapped.
Yeah.
2024, your top landmark. But no, I don't want this to go to waste. I think that it's really helpful, like for us as well, to just like say, wow, here, you know, what are the trends over time? What were the key projects and initiatives and accomplishments this year? But packaging it up and sharing it more broadly and on the website too is a great idea.
I also think you know, since sadly we're going to lose Ronnie, it could be a part of the orientation for a new board member, like, hey, this is what we did last year. You know, it really does kind of show the different aspects and different roles. Like tonight was so interesting to me to have a landmarking of a stellar building and a demolition of a sweet building. You know, it's like it runs the gamut, but that might be great as part of an orientation.
I love that idea. Excellent.
So I just want to say, since you gave us this really great year in review, none of this would have happened without the stellar staff. And I just so appreciate, I'm so amazed with what Claire, Aubrey, Marcy, you know, everybody does to make this all happen. Marin and everybody, it's kind of amazing. And I know how hard you all work. And I know there are things you sacrifice with the program, and, you know, there's a lot of evenings and weekend things and so forth. So I just, you know, with a real heartfelt thanks, you guys really have made this run pretty seamlessly. Is there anything else?
I think other than one and potentially two LDRCs, this is the end of 2024 for Landmarks Board activities. So see you all in 2025.
Thank you. So I gotta look at my clock. So the meeting is adjourned at 7:59 p.m.
It's a record.
I know, I
is.
know.
An end of year record.
Yeah.